My mind works in weird ways, especially when it comes to picking games to do videos on. All it may take for me to decide to create a video for a game is just watching someone else play it, whether I've played the game before or not. In this context, I not only have played the game before, I still own the cartridge for it. Let's talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003 for the Game Boy Advance. I didn't grow up watching the original TMNT cartoon, as I was born just after the final episode for the show and didn't catch any reruns, though that did make me prime target for another phenomenon that affected youth during the late 90s, Power Rangers. I know calling myself a 90s kid is a stretch, as I'm more of an early 2000s kid, but Power Rangers staying power is much like the TMNT, thus I watched a lot of reruns as well as each new season. Saying new there is a bit of a misnomer, knowing that all the action scenes are re-edited from the source, that being Super Sentai, but I was a kid who didn't know about the greater world that laid outside of my own surroundings, and well, guys in funny costumes beating the crap out of each other, need I say more. How does this connect to TMNT, as it just appears that I'm rambling about an unrelated show altogether? Well, watching reruns of Power Rangers led to my discovery of the TMNT, much to the dismay of people who like the TMNT. The fourth episode of Power Rangers in Space, which, yes, that is the title of the season, is a crossover episode where the Power Rangers meet the TMNT, but not the comic ones, the Next Mutation ones, i.e. the 4 regular turtles plus Venus de Milo, someone's fetish made real. I'm just a Despite the dubious quality of the episode, as I recall not only from my childhood but also rewatching all of In Space when I was older, this served as a jumping in point for me into the Turtles. Minus One Wood Rocket and Shells Full of Shame.
Do you know which porn is the best porn?
Pizza Guy porn!
Have you heard about the secret gang of ninjas committing crimes across the city? Of course you haven't heard. They're ninjas. They're really quiet.
After that point, I watched the 3 live-action movies, enjoying the first 2 like any reasonable person and disliking the last one, though any known memory of that film has left my Johnny Mnemonic-styled brain, probably replaced with images of Raiko's Great Tracts of Land. This great uncovering of the Turtles couldn't have happened at a better time either, as when I saw promos for a new animated TMNT show, I wanted it hooked directly into my veins, like the show was Mutagen and I was Kevin Nash. Funnily enough, I didn't watch much of the show until later on, due to it being ran early in the day, and as a kid, scratch that, I still hate waking up early for anything. This led to me playing the games, something that didn't require me to pretend mornings are the best thing on earth next to hangnails in the common cold. With what basically amounts to my life story, I'll tell another one in the history. Well, I don't know the exact year when development started, as much with a few games that I've done videos on, there's barely any information. I will assume that development started in mid to late 2002 to coincide with E3 2003, where the first demo of the game was shown off. The developer of the game was Hudson Soft, long-running Mario Party and Bomberman developer, with the publisher being Konami. Hudson Soft and Konami had a long-standing relationship that started in 1985, as Hudson had ported some of Konami's arcade games to the MSX and Famicom, both 2 of the major gaming systems in Japan at the time. Their relationship would change come 2001 when Hudson Soft, as a business, almost went defunct. The main bank that Hudson used, the Hokkaido Takashoku, had collapsed, leaving Hudson without any financiers. With no other options, Hudson placed themselves on the stock market, where Konami bought most of their shares, effectively owning Hudson. And that's what ultimately happened in 2011, when Hudson was assimilated not unlike a snow dog into the thing known as Konami. Going back to 2002-2003, Konami had reacquired the rights to publish TMNT games around the same time promos for the new show were being shown. The E3 demo wasn't exactly the best thing ever, something that a lot of lower-key E3 demos share in common, but what was there was at least interesting. The game was quietly released on the Game Boy Advance on October 21st, 2003, and would be later re-released as part of a double pack with TMNT 2 Battle Nexus that was also on the GBA. Seeing as there is only one console that the game was released for, I played an emulated version through the Visual Boy Advance. And before I go on to story, while looking through articles to find any information about this game's development, I found out that Craig Harris of IGN doesn't know what a turtle is, as it's not an amphibian, I'll tell you that much. A thing to note about this game's story is that it is a loose adaptation of Season 1 of the 2003 animated show, and when I mean loose, I mean it as certain plot points either don't happen or are abridged to fit within the structure of the game. There are 5 stories within the game, one connected to each one of the turtles as well as a final story, so with that said, I'll start with the leader of the bunch. You know him well, he's finally back to kick some shell. Leonardo's story opens up with the turtles in their new home, remembering the day their old home got destroyed by Mousers. Just as they remember the 15 years they spent in their old home, a TV plays a press conference from Stocktronics, with Baxter Stockman and April O'Neil explaining the company's new invention, the Stocktronics Mouser. The turtles recognize the robots as the ones that destroyed their old home, and at Stocktronics, April, ever as nosy, notes that the company has a lot of Mousers, and as she begins to question why, Stockman attempts to get rid of her. Back at the turtles' new home, Mousers attempt to kill the turtles, but Leo fights them off and finds April in a portion of the sewers. After a bit of contemplation about the situation, questioning if the turtles are even real, April decides to help the turtles break into Stocktronics and stop the Mousers. The group uses the sewer slider to sneak close to the entrance of the company undetected, and as that is happening, Hun checks in on Stockman, making sure that he's following the Shredder's orders to the letter. At the underground entrance to Stocktronics, April disables the security for the building, allowing the turtles to break into the laboratory. There, they encounter Stockman, who sicks the Queen Mouser on the group, but Leo easily defeats it, stopping the Mouser threat once and for all. The new team toasts to their success as Shredder berates Stockman for his failure, ending Leo's story. Raph's story opens up with him and Mikey training, and Mikey, being the turtle that he is, riles up Raph to the breaking point, and Leo, Dawn, and Splinter have to physically stop Raph from hurting Mikey. Splinter imparts some knowledge to Raph about balance, and Raph takes the words with him as he leaves the hideout for some fresh air. Because he left to go get some air, Raph doesn't see a TV report about a masked vigilante beating up members of the Purple Dragons. Incidentally, as Raph tries to calm down, he gets jumped by some Purple Dragon thugs, leading him to beating up a large majority of the gang and finding out where the dragons have been hanging out. Also at the hangout spot is the masked vigilante, Casey Jones, and Raph, horrified by how brutal Jones is when attacking the dragons, tries to calm him down before he legitimately kills one of the dragons. Casey and Raph get into a tussle, though Casey, through the power of skullduggery, knocks Raph flat in his ass and tells him that if he wants a rematch, Casey will be at Central Park. Raph regroups with the other turtles in the battle shell, where he correctly guesses that Casey won't walk out of the park on 2 feet, knowing that the dragons are waiting for him. Speak of the devil, Casey flies past the battle shell on his motorcycle, and Dawn, knowing that Raph wants to stop Casey, tells him to take the shell cycle. Raph obliges and races Casey to the park, getting there first. While gobsmacked at losing to a turtle in a race, Casey does open up to Raph, explaining that his father was killed by the dragons during the Dojo Wars. Wait, wrong dragons. Anyway, Raph tells Casey to calm down a bit, as if he continues the course, he'll be no better than the dragons. Breaking up this heartfelt exchange is Dragonface, who, with a grouping of the dragons, tries to beat down Raph and Casey. The two prevail and celebrate with the other turtles, though Raph and Casey do proceed to fight each other again due to their personalities, ending Raph's story. Dawn's story opens up with Stockman unveiling to Oroku Saki, the person who is the Shredder, his new creation, the Foot Tech Ninjas, who have cloaking capabilities. With this ability, the knockoff Beetleborgs ambush and capture Raph while the turtles are on a mission. The turtles' mission was to find out what is causing a series of blackouts in the city, which is directly connected to what the Foot is doing. After dealing with some purple dragons, the rest of the turtles find Raph's size and signs of a scuffle. Dawn, with quick thinking, uses the shell cell to track Raph's location, which is the Stocktronics building. Raph, in the meanwhile, is being interrogated by Hun, who ultimately decides to take some of Raph's DNA, as questioning him led to nothing. Dawn easily breaks into the company and rescues Raph, though as they head back to their hideout on the shell glider, 2 tech ninjas follow them, as Hun purposefully let Raph be rescued so the tech ninjas could find the turtles' base. This plan does fail, however, as Leo notices that Dawn and Raph are being followed, and he tells the two to stick away from the base. Dawn comes up with his own plan to stop the tech ninjas, as he tells Leo to hook up some electronics bullshit that turns out to be an infrared device, allowing Dawn to fight the ninjas and defeat them. Dawn's story ends once again with Stockman being berated by Shredder for his own failure. Even though Hun's plan of letting Raph go gave the turtles a home field advantage and enough time to figure out how to fight the tech ninjas, Shredder, you colossal idiot. Mikey's story opens up with the turtles picking up a perimeter alarm from their hideout and watching some security footage of what looks like a monster. All the turtles decide to check out the abandoned subway where the alarm was triggered and find a whole heap of foot ninjas. Foot ninjas, being dime a dozen, don't put up much of a fight for the turtles and flee deeper into the subway where there is a large tunnel, clearly created by something acidic. Littering the tunnel are crystal shards, something that the turtles can use to track down the foot if they collect enough. Since the tunnel is a perfect shape for some skateboarding, Dawn gives Mikey the shell board and tells him to collect a large amount of the crystals, which he does. The crystals lead the turtles into a mysterious cavern filled with monsters and a secret foot laboratory, where the foot have been experimenting with genetics. A foot scientist spots the turtles and sends both ninjas and monsters to stop them, but it doesn't work, and the turtles don't really do anything after that. They don't shut down the lab, they just say all's well that ends well. Quarry? Who's that? The final story opens up with Splinter finally revealing his backstory to his sons, April and Casey, and explaining how every major event that has happened in the previous stories is connected to Shredder. The four turtles, now fully trained and ready to face their nemesis, storm Oroku's skyscraper, defeating Hun and facing off with old Shredhead in his dojo. With the power of family, and Splinter showing that he's still got it, the turtles Terry Bogard Oroku Howard off the building, freeing the city from Shredder's grip. For a time, as an after-credits sequence shows that much like geese, falling off buildings it did practically nothing to the Shredder.
I think what I will say for this story is that it's serviceable, regardless if you know all about the turtles or not. I don't expect groundbreaking storytelling, and all the elements that would be in a TMNT story is there, just in an extremely bare manner. The biggest problem that the story faces is how utilitarian it is. It's something that a lot of these types of games suffer from. Most license-based games of this type usually do one of two things with its story, either adapt a plotline or series of plotlines to form the basis of the story, or tell a completely separate story that fits into canon because it is so far removed from affecting the canon. TMNT decides to go with the former, and while you do not have to have seen the episodes that the plotlines are based on, something that is actually a positive, as someone going into this game without any knowledge about the 2003 version of the show doesn't have to worry about not understanding specific parts of the story, knowing them is a double-edged sword. On one hand, knowing what specific episodes a Turtles level set is based on can help cover the blunt storytelling, as characters are not fleshed out as they are in the show and story beats are paced like a coke fiend on a bender. On the other, knowing what a level set is based around can lead to some annoyance, as Michelangelo's levels are based around the 3-part episode Notes from the Underground, yet there's no appearance from the monster trio. Well, there is, but the 3 monsters are used for enemy sprites, nothing more, nothing less. They don't show up and say hello, as again, I'm not expecting this game to cover the entirety of Notes, but not having them appear during the story segments is kinda disappointing, especially since other characters that are important in the other adapted stories do show up, like Dragonface. Mikey's story just outright ends with no resolution, which is odd, as Hudson/Konami could have easily wrote that the turtles destroyed the secret lab, thus preventing the foot from making more monsters. This is such a weird conundrum, as I can understand not wanting to fully adapt Notes from the Underground in this type of game. Notes has some strange goings-on like ancient civilizations and a bit of moral questioning, but just outright foregoing an actual ending is such a weird option that Hudson and Konami went with, as the turtles don't shut down the lab, they just talk about the neutrality of technology. None of the other adapted stories suffer from this either, and while most of the plot points of the other stories are shortened down, they at least get the general idea across. Granted, even with the bastardization of the story, I still think it works, both knowing the source episodes and not knowing, and I think that has to do with just how unimportant the story truly is. This is a portable game, and while I know portable games can have an in-depth story, like Golden Sun, Mother 3, and Fate Extra, a story is the most superfluous element when it comes to a game of this type. Saying this, I acknowledge that I'm mostly applying this to the GBA, DS, PSP era, as most games made for those consoles didn't need a grand story to motivate the player to continue playing. I would equate this to what mobile games do now, which is pass the time while waiting, but I only go that far in my comparison as that is the only thing they share in common. I think something that gets slept on in today's day and age of photorealism and wanting to be like Pixar is sprite work. While TMNT does not have the level of sprite work like Wario Land 4 or Sonic Battle, most character sprites are well animated enough. The only bad sprite I can think of is Hun's, and that lies with his dopey looking face, as if someone thwacked him but it didn't stick. Of course, the best sprites in the game belong to the turtles, who each have animations specific to them, like their idols, jumps, and level 2 and 3 attacks. Enemies also have a unique animation state for when they get up with little health left, which is a neat detail. The music, as befitting a Konami game, is mostly par for the course, though it is somewhat limited due to the GBA's sound chip. Most of the music is rock, though there is some techno mixed in. Again, most of it is good, and some tracks are remixed versions of older Turtle tracks. I do like the bit crushed version of the 2003 Turtles theme, though I like it in the novelty sense, much like watching Shrek on the GBA. Sound effects are pretty standard, and none really stick out besides the laser noise, as it is extremely ear-grating. Imagine the ghost from Ghosts and Goblins tuned up to 11 trying to compete with someone raking forks and knives over a blackboard. The presentation does take a dip in quality when it comes to the story segments, as all of them sans one are flat character images on a flat background compressed to all get out. There is limited animation to help convey certain parts, like Raph hitting Mikey, and there are different sprites for every character, but much like the actual content of the story, it is bare. The one story scene that doesn't fit this mold is when Shredder falls off his skyscraper, and the only reason why I bring this up is just so I can say he isn't the only one who has survived something like that. Stages suffer from lack of variation, as most are either a sewer, alley, or lab, and the stages that don't fall under any one of those, the subway and the cave system, aren't interesting either. Each stage looks nice and has some visual distinctions from themselves, such as Raph's alleys not having the crazy Manny sign, but they just aren't interesting stages to be in. Two of the vehicle stages, Leo's and Mikey's, make use of Mode 7, which does make them stick out, but both stages are also set in the sewers, which doesn't lend itself to compelling design. The other two vehicle stages, Raph's and Dawn's, are some of the better looking stages, with Dawn's being the standout. TMNT 2003 is a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up with some minigames thrown into the mix. Each turtle is selectable, and every one of them goes down their own separate story path. The types of enemies each turtle will face will also be different, as not every turtle faces the same grouping of enemies. Controls during the 2D brawling sections are standard, with the left and right D-pads moving a turtle in that direction, the down D-pad allowing a turtle to crouch, and the up D-pad, while rarely used, allows a turtle to enter doors and activate objects. After moving for a short period of time either left or right, the turtle of choice will begin to run. This can also be achieved by double tapping either left or right on the D-pad. Do take note that the turtles do have a bit of weight to them when moving, and they don't turn on a dime. The A button jumps, and most of the turtles have a double jump, but it is a bit finicky to use. A player, if they intend on double jumping, must immediately press the A button after a jump, otherwise a double jump will not come out. The B button is for standard attacks, and each turtle, when hitting an enemy that doesn't go down in one hit, has a combo that they will run through, ending with a hard knockdown. Combos can't be cancelled out of, meaning the only ways to stop doing a combo is either stop hitting the B button, having the combo drop via an enemy dying before it finishes, or by being hit out of one. By hitting B in combination with holding the D-pad up or down, a turtle can do different attacks that can be worked into a combo. However, these extra attacks can only be worked into specific parts of the basic combo and essentially replace the ender of the basic combo. Once the basic combo has started its ending sequence, the additional attacks can't be used. Every turtle has the ability to charge up their attacks by holding down the B button. When an attack is being charged up, a meter underneath the turtle's health bar will begin to rapidly fill. There are 3 sections to the bar, 2 small sections and 1 large one, and each section denotes the power of the charged attack. There are no level 1 charge attacks, all that happens is that a turtle just throws out a standard attack. Level 2 charge attacks do slightly less damage than a full combo and knock down anyone it hits. Honestly, there is no legitimate reason to ever use level 2 charge attacks, as full combos do more damage and lock down groups of enemies. Level 3 charge attacks, while risky to use, do more damage than the standard combo, enough to generally kill most enemies, and typically have added effects that make them better than their level 2 counterparts. Every turtle also has a dash attack and a group attack, which is done by pressing R. The group attack drains health when it hits enemies, just like in a classic beat 'em up. Combos can be done after a dash attack depending if the enemy has been knocked into the sides of the screen, acting like a pseudo wall bounce without the wall or the bounce. The group attack is about as useless as level 2 charge attacks, as enemies aren't that aggressive and the attack deals pitiful damage while draining health. Each vehicle has its own controls, which I will cover later. As stated previously, any turtle is selectable from the get-go, and each one of them experiences their own set of 4 stages. The most common stage are the 2D side-scrolling ones, where the player attempts to get to the end of the stage while fighting groups of enemies and dealing with environmental hazards like spikes and lasers. In these stages are collectible items like crystals, which only show up on normal or higher, and mutagen, which recovers health. All 2D sections are divided up into rooms, and a new room is entered when a transition happens. These transitions act as checkpoints, so when a turtle is defeated, they will restart at the beginning of the room they just entered. When enemies are encountered in these stages, the turtle is locked to the screen and can't proceed forward until every enemy is defeated. Enemies range from Mauser robots that go down in one hit, purple dragon thugs, and a few varieties, which include but are not limited to 3 basic grunts, a charger, a brawler, and a bomb thrower, foot ninjas, which come in weaponless, sword, bow, and heavy variety, foot technicians that come with a baton, explosive vial, or laser, and monsters, a triple pack of acid spitters that may strike at close ranges. When a turtle is hit with an attack that doesn't knock them down, they are typically locked in hit stun that will last until the next enemy attack, though some enemies do attack slower, allowing the player to recover from hit stun and act before being hit again. Vehicle stages each have their own different controls as each vehicle is different from each other. Leo's vehicle is the sewer slider, and its section requires Leo to aim a crosshair with the D-pad to mark targets so he can shoot them with the A button as he heads down a sewer line to reach the goal. The sewer slider can be freely fired, but is much better to lock onto targets. It also has bombs that can be used with the R button, and they wipe out every enemy on the screen. Raph's vehicle is the shell cycle, which uses the B button to accelerate, the A button to jump, and the D-pad to switch lanes. In its section, Raph must reach the goal before Casey Jones does, all the while avoiding being slowed down by obstacles and collecting gas cans, as Raph's health is his gas and it is constantly going down. Don's vehicle stage is the shell glider, and it functions much like a 2D shmub. The glider can be moved with the D-pad, it can shoot with the B button, which can also be charged up for a spread shot, and it has a spin move that is done by pressing A. I don't know the purpose of this move, as it doesn't actually dodge the missiles or mines in the stage, so yeah, why does it even exist? Don must make it to the end while destroying missiles and avoiding mines, which even includes shooting mines to move them out of the way. Mikey's vehicle is the shell board, and in its stage, Mikey must collect enough crystals before reaching the end of the sewer pipe. The board can move left and right with the D-pad, jump with A, and go around the full pipe with B. Out of all the vehicle stages, it is the most boring to me, as collecting crystals is nowhere near exciting as shooting Mousers or missiles, or racing Casey. A thing to note about the vehicle stages is that if the player fails in them, they must be replayed from the beginning, as none of the vehicle stages have checkpoints. The last type of stages are the boss stages, where one of the turtles must go 1-on-1, 1-on-2, or 2-on-25 with a boss character. Bosses generally don't require much strategy outside of hitting them until they die, though some might require switches being pulled before the boss can be damaged, or defeating a group of enemies before the boss appears. Stated briefly beforehand, there is a difficulty select of easy, normal, and hard. While I don't know the overall changes the difficulty has on the game outside of crystals showing up in the stages, it is required to play the game on normal or higher to finish it, as the Shredder stage only opens up when the game is played on those difficulties. The Shredder stage is a mixture of the standard 2D side-scrolling stages with two bosses, Hun and Shredder. The player can pick any one of the turtles to play through the stage. The crystals that are collected go towards absolutely nothing to my knowledge. Why do they exist? The same reason why the glider has a spin move. Lastly, there are some additional shell cycle courses that the player can race through, as well as cheats, both for this game and the GameCube version. When the game is beaten, it rewards a player with a cheat code for the GameCube game, and additional cheats can be entered on the cheat menu, such as unlocking the additional cycle courses and Very Hard Mode, though Very Hard Mode is not unlocked through the cheat menu, it is instead unlocked by the Konami code -start and/or select. The best part of this game, hands down, is how differentiated the turtles are. In previous TMNT games, the turtles were more or less palette swaps of each other, having the same basic moveset with no personal flair. While each of the turtles in this game have the same basic controls, visually their moves look different from each other, and there are some slight differences between the four. This mostly has to do with their up and down attacks. Leo's basic 3-hit combo can be extended into a 4-hit from his up attack, allowing him to chain his jumping attack off of his up attack. Mikey can outright juggle enemies in the air with his up attack. Raph's up attack has an immediate follow-up different from his standard jumping attack, and Don's up attack hits multiple times, making his up modified combo the longest in the game. There is a bit of sharing between the down attacks, as both Raph and Don share a sweep attack that follows up into a lunging kick, but Raph's is much easier to do in the base combo compared to Don's, which acts like a standalone attack. Mikey is the only one who doesn't have a down attack, but to balance this, Mikey has a backdash that he can attack out of. Almost each turtle has something unique to them like that, such as Don not having a double jump but having an extended dash attack to get across large distances and a high jump. All of their level 3 charge attacks have different utilities to them, as Leo's covers ground while attacking enemies, Raph's does major damage to singular enemies, Don's is a great get off me attack, and Mikey's can hit enemies without putting them into danger. I will say that not all the level 3 attacks are that great, as Raph's can be situational to use and Mikey's can leave him vulnerable to damage, but again, it is a nice way to differentiate the turtles. Another thing I like are the vehicle sections. While I don't like all of them, looking at you, Shellboard, they do help break the pace up, as if the game was all 2D sections, it would be a bit boring. And while I've already mentioned it in the presentation section, I love the game's use of sprite work. I think the absolute worst part about the game are the bosses. Remember how I said there isn't much strategy involved when fighting a boss? Well, this applies to every boss. It's more or less a damage race to see who can kill the other first. It doesn't help that every boss fight has at least one mutagen pickup to heal any damage taken, meaning the game outright rewards taking damage to deal more damage. Most bosses aren't even all that aggressive, and even the ones that are, like the Mauser Queen or Hun, either have the above problem of mutagen making the fight trivial or their attacks are outright ineffective. The Mauser Queen is definitely guilty of this, as while my footage does show me getting my ass kicked, that mostly stems from my impatience of trying to hit the boss. It is well beyond easy to loop the Mauser Queen into always doing her windmill attack, as if you are anywhere near her, she will decide to do it. Shredder is by far the most disappointing boss of them all, as even though he takes less damage from attacks and deals more damage, almost all of his attacks are knockdowns, giving the player invincibility and the freedom to wail on him for as long as it is active. Shredder himself also has a unique knockdown state which only activates after he takes a set amount of damage. Unlike some of the other bosses, Shredder having such a specific knockdown state makes him extremely damage prone, as a level 3 charge attack from Dawn can, pun intended, shred his health in a matter of seconds. He also suffers the same issues as the Mauser Queen, where his AI can be tricked into doing not much of anything. The arena also has 2 mutagen canisters, once again facilitating the devil-may-care strategy of damage rushing. Shredder's attacks are also pretty woeful as well, as outside of his slash attack he does at short range and his duplication attack they are easy to avoid. I can at least say that the final boss in this game isn't the GameCube version, which is probably one of the cheapest bosses outside of an SNK game. Mikey gets hit the worst with poor levels. While his first stage isn't exactly bad, I hate how platforming based his third level is. The game doesn't have good platforming, and while this issue is slightly mitigated by Mikey magnetizing to smaller platforms, it's so uninteresting. The same could be said about his vehicle stage. He also gets shortchanged when it comes to bosses, as he doesn't fight one outside of Shredder. He just gets an enemy rush. The gameplay loop can also be a bit stale, as most encounters will go the same way, just mashing B until every enemy is dead. It can be a bit mindless. For a portable beat-em-up, I think TMNT 2003 is pretty decent. I wouldn't say that it matches the best TMNT beat-em-ups, but it has its own identity with its own mechanics that makes it stand out from the rest. It does stumble a bit at certain points, but not enough for me to get overtly annoyed. Since it was only released on the GBA, it is best to emulate the game, though if you want to find a cartridge, be my guest. Do take note that the game is short, but I don't view that as a negative, as I had fun with my experience.